Hi, good morning. Now, our today's lecture would be on rethinking the relevance of credit rating agencies. I'm sure we all know that we have passed through various events, whether it was the global financial crisis or much earlier to that, the Enron fiasco, and then closer home, we have an ILFS or a BNB or a lot of such events which have happened in the last few years. In fact, let me put it like this. The last decade has been very eventful, and more in terms of, the kind of scenarios we have witnessed in terms of the various crises wherein uh, a lot of investors have lost their money, and it has also given a scope for the regulators to relook at the kind of, rules they have framed. Could we relook at some of these rules? Could we relook at some of these legislations? So with this small background, let us take you through to this very interesting topic, which has become highly relevant, rethinking the role of credit rating agencies. Now, what are these credit rating agencies? Have they been for a long time? And what is their function? What is their role? I'm sure we have all heard a lot of names of the credit rating agencies, whether it's at the global level or at the domestic level. At the global level, when we say credit rating agencies, we are implying Standard & Poor, Moody's, and Fitch. So I'm only naming the three global rating agencies which do account for, I think, approximately 80% of the total credit rating which happens. Closer home, the domestic credit rating agencies could be our CRISIL, ICRA, CARE, to just name a few. Now, what do these credit rating agencies do? What has been their role? How has it changed? And how do we say relook, rethink, or should we restart? Now, these are the terms which, we will have a look in terms of the roles and the functions of the credit rating agencies. So what we are going to do with you today would be not really distinguish between the global and the Indian counterpart, though we'll take you through to both the global and the Indian counterpart. But when we talk of the role, when we talk of the rethink, and when we talk of a relook, we are going to keep it a little more neutral. Okay? Because I'm sure each one of you understands that each of these global credit rating agencies has some kind of an association with our domestic credit rating agencies. So, what role do the credit rating agencies do? Credit rating agencies have evolved in the last few years, and in the context of India, mainly after 1990s, the cutoff period we have for globalization and liberalization. And their important role is in providing the investors a comprehensive analysis of the risk associated with the debt securities issued by corporates. Now, the need arises because whether it's the investors, whether it's the corporates, or whether it's you and me, we really would not be able to arrive at a good judgment about, let's say, if an IPO is coming, or let's say a company comes up with with an instrument, let's say a long-term instrument. So the credit rating agencies help us in arriving at an impartial, reliable, and independent assessment of the instrument which they are offering. So what happens? In a nutshell, we are trying to find out, will the company be in a position to repay the loan? And if I've invested in debt securities, would the company be in a position to honor its commitment after the time period? So let's say if it is a 5-year debt security, would the company honor its commitment? Now, that is an important dimension which, as individual investors, as corporates, or I would say as institutional investors, it concerns us. So the repayment of the loan, and if I put it in a little different language, the credit risk management. So what is the credit risk profile of the organization? And what is the probability and the possibility of the loan being repaid? That's the bottom line. There are a lot of other add-on factors, but they come along with the main tagline. So the main tagline of a credit rating agency should be the soundness of the proposal, the repayment capability of the proposal. Now, how do they go about doing this? They go about doing this by giving a qualitative rating. And a qualitative rating could be in terms of our alphabets. So you could have an A or a B or a C or a D. And for each of these credit rating agencies, each of these qualitative rating has a special meaning. So the credit rating agencies could say A or a double A or a triple A. Now let's say there are two instruments and Moody is rating it and an Standard & Poor is also rating it. Now both of them feel they are AAA, so a triple A. But there's a slight difference. So if I change the example a little. So let's say Standard & Poor is rating both the instruments. So it's a triple A for both. But the rating agency feels there's a slight difference between them. How do they show their distinction to the investors? So one triple A could be given an A plus. So triple A plus as a superscript, and the other could just put it as A, triple A. Or, we could say triple A minus a superscript. So what are we trying to say? We're trying to say that credit rating agencies could add a subscript, a super subscript with a plus or a minus sign to enhance or maybe, decrease the rating a little. We'll also tell you about the parameters the credit rating agencies use as we go along. So, what is credit rating agency? A summarized or a synoptic view of a CRA, as they are more generally called, would be that they're telling you about the repayment possibility, the credit risk possibility, and how do they do it? So if let's say it's a GAIL, let's say a Gas Authority of India Limited, or a State Bank of India, and they want to come out with a 5-year loan, and how do they come out? They will offer this to the public, but how will the credit rating agency evaluate the proposal? The credit rating agency will evaluate the proposal on the basis of, to begin with, the financial statements with which a GAIL or an SBI will give to the credit rating agency. So the profit and loss account, the balance sheet, the cash flow statement are some of the important financial statements which the respective company gives to the credit rating agency. In addition to this, there will be some qualitative indicators also. Okay, so the credit rating agencies look at both quantitative and qualitative parameters for the company they are evaluating. Let us give you a brief idea first of the global credit rating agencies. The global credit rating agencies in terms of Moody's, Standard and Poor, and Fitch, which I just called out. And then about the Indian credit rating agencies. Yeah. Before we go ahead, who regulates the credit rating agencies? Is it RBI? Is it some other regulator? Or is it SEBI? So the Indian credit rating agencies are regulated by our very own Securities and Exchange Board of India. And what about the global credit rating agencies? The global credit rating agencies are rated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Most of them are located in the US, and the counterpart of SEBI in the US is the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is SEC. So we have three major rating agencies. Okay? And, Standard and Poor has its headquarters in the US. Fitch is located both in New York and London. Plus, please remember, irrespective of where they are located, they will look at instruments all over the world. Okay? And in today's context, it's not very difficult to visualize this because you have global trade, you have international trade, you have companies who are operating all over. So if that is so, then the evaluation, then, it pays, it is significant that the evaluation is also done by the global rating agencies. Okay. We'll take you very slowly to, our little doubts, our little suspicion on the whole working of the credit rating agencies. And that's why we justify the title of our discussion today, Rethinking the Role. So, the way we have talked about is that each one of them, to help you understand a little more, the CRISIL, ICRA, CARE, each one of them was set by Indian regulators like RBI, like a UTI, and other regulatory agencies which were existing at that point of time. To come back to our global credit rating agencies, these three rating agencies, or let me put it as Standard and Poor and Moody's, had an important role to play during the global financial crisis. And that is where, the whole set of doubts and suspicions have, people have started having this suspicion over the role and how they are assigning the rating to the credit, to the various instruments which are being floated. Obviously, all this is not done for free. So whether it's the Indian credit rating agencies or the global rating agencies, they charge a substantive fee from their clients. Okay. Before we go to a little criticism or relooking, as I would say, let us first tell you the purpose, and if I put it in a simple language, the positives of a lot of these credit rating agencies. Honestly, till the global financial crisis, there was a complete reliance on the role of these credit rating agencies. They would define a truly global benchmark. So much so that, like a Standard and Poor and Moody's, started with a strategic alliance with our CRISIL, ICRA, and CARE. So the point we are trying to make is that these credit rating agencies, they are used as a benchmark. They are, so their rating is being used as a reference by all the rating agencies across the globe, internationally. So if this is the kind of background in which they operate, then, it makes a little more, or it's required to understand their function, to look at the kind of role they play. So just a little idea about the kind of rating they use. But yes, I would say, if you look up online and you key in a Standard & Poor or Moody's, they may not give you the detailed methodology, but they will, by and large, give you the broad parameters they use for rating the instruments. So you could have a AAA or a AA or an A. The Moody's is, like a AA, A capital, and a small a1, and so on and so forth. Okay. So these are the various kinds of symbols they use to rate an instrument. Okay. To come to the global financial crisis, I hope a lot of you know the kind of impact the global financial crisis had. And before we help you understand what is written in the slide here, without going into too much details, it's important to understand that a week before, or just about 3-4 days before it collapsed, way back in 2008. And I'm going to give you an example of two large organizations. One is our Lehman Brothers, okay, and the other is the American International Group. Okay. Lehman Brothers had an investment grade rating. That's the terminology they use, which means it had a rating of A, which was maintained by Standard & Poor even 5 days before it filed for bankruptcy. That is one. Moody's waited even longer and downgraded Lehman Brothers only 1 business day before they collapsed. Okay. And Standard & Poor gave American International Group, which we are all, we know it as an AIG, an investment grade rating of again A, less than a week before it collapsed. In fact, let me put the record straight, AIG did not collapse. Since it was an insurance company, they had to nationalize it. So they had to actually rescue this company. And therefore, the question is, who is to blame? Now, let us set the context a little more clear. The point is, Lehman Brothers gets a good rating, an investment grade rating, as they say. AIG, and there was this, there were Stern and Beers, and there were other companies also. They all got a good rating by Standard & Poor, and you'll appreciate why I'm emphasizing this a little more, because a little later, we are going to help you understand how they treated India way back in 2016 when we went for a rating. Okay? So not that we were not rated earlier, but the 2016 case became a little more prominent. So, these, the credit rating agencies, they rated these companies which were their home countries' organizations they were given a good rating, and because of the size, they were not comfortable downgrading. So, as we are going to help you understand later, size plays a little important role in the mind of these credit rating agencies. So it could be size, it could be the developed countries. So we'll help you understand how they are a little more harsh to developing countries, how they are a little more harsh to smaller companies. But when it comes to large companies like a Lehman and AIG, everything, or a lot of caution, is thrown to the wind. So it is in that context, it is in that background that we make the statement that the credit rating agencies bear a heavy burden of the responsibility for the financial meltdown. And why do we say it was their seal of approval that triggered the crisis? Because they only gave an investment grade rating. And investors like you and me will keep looking at, okay, so there are events happening, but we'll still look at, has S&P downgraded? Has Moody downgraded? No. So how do we, take care of the rumors which are floating in the system? And let me also give you another fact here. Around 2009 and 10, when I should say the complete after effects of the crisis and the meltdown were felt, more so by US. The main country that got impacted by the meltdown at that time was US. It was found, in the entire, I would say, a reactive analysis. In the entire reactive analysis, it was found that most of the discussion, they concluded by saying that who betrayed the investors, who betrayed the economy? It was the credit rating agencies. So it was said that it was their seal of approval that triggered the crisis. It was their seal of approval which helped the crisis reach the level it went. So if we were to blame a single institution for the global meltdown, I think a major role would be the credit rating agencies led by a Standard and Poor and Moody's. Now, with this background, it was felt that it was now time to relook at the role and the functioning of the global credit rating agencies. But before I go ahead, there is one more perspective to this entire, I would say, the economic crisis or the meltdown of 2008. So if you read a lot of literature, they'll say, who is to blame for the economic crisis of 2008? Other thought which has also come up is that the main culprit was financial regulation and supervision. So with this little background, what was the blame which these rating agencies were subject to? It was said that they gave fraudulent rating. Now what is the impact of fraudulent rating? If you withdraw the rating at the proper time, at least the crisis could have been stopped. But they helped in intensifying the crisis. In fact, during the crisis, there was a term which became very common, and that is, what we refer to, and they said it was toxic assets. So what did they do? Subprime assets. Now, what is a prime asset? A prime asset is a good asset which will generate income. A subprime asset is an asset which will not generate. or not generate income to the extent which it should. And there was another term which they used, which is a little more extreme than even subprime, and that is toxic assets. So you know what they did? They gave a AAA rating to toxic assets, to subprime assets. Now, what does this mean? If you and me were to buy these assets, we'll say, oh, a global rating agency has given a AAA rating. I'm sure they are good. There is something wrong in our judgment. But they were colluding, or let me put it as they were not doing their work diligently. So there was another term which was used for the credit rating agencies at that point of time, which said the credit rating agencies are reactive and not proactive. Now, what does that mean? What this meant was that the credit rating agencies became wise after the event, which means, you know, after a Lehman Brothers and an AIG collapse, they became smart and they downgraded the rating. So, like I said, 5 days before, 1 day before. So, the other criticism, as we said, was about being reactive and not proactive. But the fact remains that these rating agencies need to be proactive. They need to give us early warning indicators. You don't really need to know when, like a kingfisher, when it goes bankrupt. You need to know 2 years in advance, 1 year in advance, because it is accepted that before an institution goes bankrupt, at least 2 or 3 years before, in most of the cases, there will be early warning signals. And all this will be reflected in our balance sheet, will be reflected in our cash flow. So, if you look at the balance sheet, you look at the cash flow, and the major, let's say, the major part of your income is not coming from your operating activities. All of us as a finance professor would know that we need to relook that if the operating activities are not generating the main income, then we need to see what is generating, and that is that sustainable or not. Okay. So what is the lesson from the present or from the global financial crisis? Do not blindly rely on the credit rating, because it was felt that till that time, each one of us was blindly relying on the credit rating agencies. And when we talk about the Indian credit rating agencies, we'll take you through that story also. So, a little more summary form in terms of what we have said is that the global financial crisis, the global financial meltdown has put the credit rating agencies in a different sort of a limelight. And the warning is, please don't go by what they say blindly. Use your own judgment. The point is that, yes, we will use our own judgment. But if we have to use our own judgment, then why are the companies paying them substantive fees? I'm sure you will appreciate they charge substantive fee from their clients. So the rating which happens is not free. Now, let's say, a client comes to, or a Lehman Brothers comes to a Standard & Poor for rating, and Lehman Brothers gives it a AAA rating. Look at the kind of people who are going to invest in their bonds. So we are going to talk about this also. Is there a flawed business model? Is the whole working a little, needs rethinking? So those are other issues which we need to get into. Apart from this, we all know that the global financial crisis was, a home meltdown. So there were a lot of home buyers, and there was a process of securitization, which I'm not going into details here. But yes, how the loans were divided into tranches, and then how these tranches were sold as good loans to the buyers later. So All these were issues, and they were brought to the limelight. So it was said that the credit rating agencies gave dubious rating to various mortgage linked instruments. And if we recollect, the period of 2002 or 3 till 2007, all of us know, even in India and otherwise, it was a boom for the financial services sector. It was a roller coaster ride for the financial services. They're doing very, very well. So whether it was, your the stock exchange market or the instruments that were floated, everything was oversupplied. There was a general buoyancy in the market that everything which, comes out in the market in terms of an instrument or whatever is floated is going to be a success. Okay.